Hey, we're at Radio Days here in beautiful Prague, and this is Eric Newsom
Perfect.
from
Yes.
Magnificent Noise.
Yes.
Isn't this an amazing view,
It
Eric?
is just an amazing city. I think we'll just leave it at that.
It's a magnificent
It
city.
is indeed magnificent.
Magnificent Noise. What do you do? What do you produce?
We produce a bunch of different shows. We're largely a producer of material that's then released by the New York Times or CNN, ESPN, so on and so forth, like a lot of other. But we're starting to translate now into releasing original material ourselves. And we also consult for a number of companies, several I've mentioned, and so on and so forth.
You'll be contracted by someone like the New York Times to help with their podcasts and audio.
Mhm.
Okay. I had the impression they were all done in-house, but that's not the case then.
Not the case. We are completely independent organization, but we get contracted to work for things for those organizations, or sometimes for, like we produce Esther Perel's podcast, Where Should We Begin, which is a huge podcast that is distributed now by Vox, used to be by Spotify, yet we are the producers of the show.
And in the session that you've just come out of, the summit, you were talking about how to come up with a good idea, because I know many people think everything has been done a million times over and every other way, but you think that's absolutely not the case.
Unless you're in the business of producing mediocre, middlebrow, uninspiring, unexceptional content, there are always things that people are passionate about and stories they believe should be told. And it's not necessarily a matter of, do I create this podcast? It's how can I make this podcast meaningful for a group of people? And when you start focusing on the group of people that you want to serve with that podcast, that gives you a clear indication of what you should be making and how you should be making it. And you find there's a lot more white space there creatively. If you're like, I'm going to make a podcast about film, well, there are thousands of podcasts about film.
So niche is good when starting out, because people try and be as broad as possible, probably to try and get as many ears.
That's what they think is going to happen. The opposite ends up happening. It's a broadcaster is it's actually an agrarian word for spreading seeds, but the broadness of it is very intentional. You're trying to reach with a radio signal, in a radio signal that could be 20 or 30 in a large market, different signals. You have to have a large audience to justify a placement on any, even a public service signal. When you're dealing with podcasting, all of a sudden your addressable audience is 7 billion people, or 8 billion people, right? And
yeah, we just said 8.
yeah, and there's it's 8. So you can find a group of people globally who will care about a subject, and you can go deep and it's almost like, instead of thinking how broad can I make this so it's for a broad number of people, it's how fine can I make it so I can go deep into that community of people.
And make it outstanding and magnificent for that audience.
Yeah, that's the point of it, is that if you're creating things that are exceptional, they become distinct. Right?
Final question, Eric. What is hot at the moment in the US? Is it still true crime, or what is on the boil at the moment?
I don't pay a lot of attention to what's popular. I don't. That's a very backwards looking way of looking at things. If you say true crime is popular and it's been popular, but will it be popular next year? Probably. When people are always asking, like, well, what's the sectors where people can jump in and make new podcasts? I'm like, that's the absolute wrong way to think.
But are you not bound by the commissioning editors who think, oh, everyone's listening to these podcasts now, so Eric, hit us with 4 ideas in this genre now because it's hot?
A lot of people think like that. That's not the way I do business. That's not the way I work. I have a string of podcasts to my credit that have been extremely popular, huge things, millions of downloads to millions of downloads. And each one of them, when I started, was something that no one had ever heard of or thought of before. And that's, I think, the hallmark of a great podcast is when, that's why I don't worry about competition much, because they don't have the assets or they don't have the ideas that we do when we make it. So
I love it. The man doesn't worry about competition. Eric, thank you so much.
Thank you.